Producer, engineer Kevin Cremin. We've heard Rick and Dave say that countless times, of course, on the radio. How often do you drop that name when you're making a restaurant reservation or picking up your dry cleaning and say, oh, it's Kevin Cremin, producer, engineer Kevin Cremin?
That does happen more than you would think. It happens at the checkout line in the grocery store when, you swipe your card and the cash register receipt, they want to say thank you. Oh, and then say always, so how's the pitching going to be? Things like that, And years ago, I had my oldest sister called on New Year's, and she was went home, so she wanted to wish me Happy New Year, and she had to call directory assistance for the number, and she asked for the number for Kevin Cremin, and the directory assistance operator says, "You mean producer engineer Kevin Cremin?" So she was quite surprised.
She had no idea you were a big deal out here in Seattle.
Not at least name wise, no,
big deal out here in Seattle. I know the story about how you came to be with the Seattle Mariners from Oklahoma, and I think it's a pretty interesting story and how Dave Niehaus was instrumental in that. But I'd like you to tell it.
Well, he was very much so. I mean, in 1982, when the Mariners went to Kansas City, in those days, we would hire a stringer or clubhouse guy, someone
for road games.
Yeah, someone to get the post-game guest, home games as well. But someone to go down to the field at the end of the game, tap Dave Henderson or whoever, and say, hey, they'd like to have you on the post-game show. Sit them down in the dugout, hand them the microphone, hand them the headphones, wait for the interview to finish, get that stuff, take it back upstairs. And during the game, you would keep the out-of-town scoreboard as well. And so a friend of mine, Grail Hallett, who was working at KVI at the time, who carried the broadcast in those days, was producing J. Michael Kenyon's show and the Mariners' post-game show. And they had kind of an extended show in those days where they'd also do an additional guest, and you were required to kind of shepherd that person into the booth as well. And so I knew Grail. He was from Tulsa, so am I. And he grew up as best friends with one of my older brothers. And he called and said, I know you go to Kansas City to games and such. When the Mariners are in town, would you like to do this, help them out, get the post-game guest? And I said, what all do you do?
You're living in Tulsa at the time.
Yeah, he explains what.
It's a bit of a drive, right?
4.5, 5 hours. But, a drive that we made as a family and I made personally many, many times to go to ball games. That was the closest major league city to Tulsa.
That's no small commitment to see a ball game.
No, it's not. We did it. I grew up doing it. So anyway, I had relatives there. I had cousins and such. So we would regularly go to KC, and he, explains what the job is, and I say, okay, I'm happy to do that. I go with the clubhouse and on the field. He says, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm in. So the 2 trips the Mariners made to Kansas City, I went up and did that and met Dave and Ken Wilson at the time, who was Dave's partner, and it was. We got along. I knew where the barbecue joints were. I knew where the places to go after the game were because I'd been to Kansas City a lot. And so after the game, we'd go here and go there, and we got along, great. And the season ended, and Dave called me and said, hey, how would you like the producer-engineer job? They at the time had a guy who did home games, another guy who did road games, and he wanted somebody to do all of them who was more, had some baseball in them as well as being able to engineer. And I said, Dave, that sounds great. I'd love to do that, but I don't know the first thing about it. He says, they'll teach you. So he calls, I said, if you can make this happen, believe me, I'm with you. So he calls Shannon Sweat, who was the station manager at KVI in those days, and talks Shannon, and sings my praises, I guess, to Shannon. Shannon calls me, and I talk to him, and I don't really know how to do this. He says, we'll train you and everything. And I said, okay, I'm in. And he sends me a letter, and start on such and such a date, and we were going to go to Arizona. And so I got married to Margaret in the interim, and we loaded up a 24-footer to drive to Seattle, hooked the car on back, just about had that thing loaded up, and I got a call from the program director at the station at the time, Jay Green. Well, Jay had other ideas. He had someone else in mind for the job, and then he starts asking me about, what are your qualifications, and I didn't really have any. And he said, this isn't going to work. And I said, well, I've got an agreement with your station manager, and I've got a U-Haul that's 3/4 full of furniture. I'll be there soon, and we'll talk. And so I got there, and they, dumped the equipment out on the table and said, set it up. And I said, I can't. And so the old engineer there, Dick Velo, who'd been, he'd been with the station for some time, and he's the guy who did the road games for him. And he painstakingly showed me each step of the way how to hook it up, how to, maintain the sound. And we'd hook that stuff up and tear it down and hook it up and tear it down and hook it up and tear it down until I felt comfortable doing it, until he felt comfortable letting me do it. And packed up the gear, headed to Arizona, and did the first spring training game just scared to death, man. I mean, my hands were shaking. I had no idea what I was doing.
Did you have any trouble that first week, first few games?
Nope, we got it in, got on the air, and Rick was new that year too. And Rick had just come from 8 years in the minor leagues where he was his own engineer. So he had some knowledge as well. So, he could help, which he did. And he still does, actually. I mean, he always helps me pack up the gear.
Man of all trades.
Yeah. And, it worked, and it's been doing it this is year 29 coming up, so, I guess it worked out.
You're 29, all with Dave Niehaus. You probably knew him as well or better than anybody else in the world. And you told me a story the other day that I hadn't heard before, and I've known Dave since I was right out of college, So
right.
This was a neat story to tell, and if you wouldn't mind telling it, I think fans about Dave Niehaus would love to hear it.
Well, we were talking about different things about Dave, and I told you about the time we do 162 games, regular season games. None of us, we rarely miss a game. We do 20, 30 spring games, so that's 180, 190 games a year. But we don't really get to go to ball games. And sometimes you'll get to a city on an off day, the travel day or whatever, and they're playing the last game of a series with another club, so they're playing that night. We get to Boston one evening, and Red Sox are in town. So on the plane, I'm talking to Dave. Let's go to the ball game. So we get there, get to the air, land, get to the hotel, walk to Fenway. It's walking distance, and as you get close to Fenway, as you know, it's that great old neighborhood.
Oh man,
it's
fun to walk
all
to the
of a sudden, there's this brick building, and you're looking at it, and the lights are starting to take effect, and you can see that, and you can hear the PA. It was Sherm Feller at the time, and you can hear that, and all of a sudden, it's closing in on first pitch, and Dave takes off running. He doesn't want to miss the first pitch, runs past the Ted Williams statue. We go pick up our tickets, run inside, and, we did make the first pitch, and it was, it's just lets you know that Dave's sincerity, love for the game, it was real. He loved baseball. He wasn't going to miss that, He'd never been to a game at Fenway, for crying out loud. That's
so funny because the year that I spent on the road with the team in 1997, I had a job where I was doing the part of the post-game show with the Mariners. And the first road trip we had was to Fenway.
Yeah.
And he knew that my family was from the Bronx, and I'd grown up a Yankees fan as a kid because I was rooting for the Yankees well before the Mariners were here, so you guys don't think I'm a traitor. And we get there, and he says, "Kid, come here." He says, "I know you like Yankee Stadium, but here there's ghosts." There's ghosts.
He loved no place better than Fenway.
He loved it. He made me go sit in the one red seat out in right center.
Right, absolutely. The seat Williams homered off Freddie Hutchinson, and it hit some guy's straw hat, 502 feet from home plate or something, and they commemorate that seat. In fact, when we went back to Fenway, when the tiles fell,
94.
the Kingdom, 94. And we had to hit the road, and so these were not regularly scheduled games for the Red Sox.
Right.
So they put all seats on sale for $10, and this is before the Red Sox were selling out.
Right. Some thin years there.
Yeah, but it was fun that day. All those people who they were getting to sit in seats they never sat in before, but it was almost like a procession of people going up to that red seat and taking turns sitting.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. It was something.
We were there, but the first one was at the ballpark, really. So Dave made me go sit in that red seat and think about it.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a good. You need to.
And I thought he was putting me on. I turned to Rizzy, and Rizzy goes,
"Yeah, no. That's he loved that ballpark.
You better do it.
Just loved it."
What's it going to be like this year without him? Have you thought about that?
Oh yeah. No, it's going to be different. I can tell you that. We've gone through the funeral and the shock and the events that we had here at the ballpark, which were all very nice, and the fans, they let him know that they loved him. Yeah, it was. And but it's going to be different February 27th at 11:55 when we go on the air, and he's not part of it.